Hey folks, this is Grim Perspectives. I'm Grim. Last time we talked about linear plot design and its limitations and limited applicability to pen and paper campaigns. Because, well, from my point of view, linear design is something we as game masters, as creators of content, took over from media such as TV series, movies, novels, stuff like that, because they are scripted in a linear way. They tell epic storylines. We want to tell epic storylines in a fantasy setting as well, so we take stuff over that might not be best suited to our medium. In this case, pen and paper, because pen and paper works with the choices of players. Player choices do not really interact well with linear plot design, so why design plot in a linear way? Well, I had some interesting discussions last week with some of you folks on, well, social media. And there are two arguments that came up and again. And arguments for designing content in a linear way. And those arguments were, on the one hand, if you offer your player a choice, then you might face choice paralysis. So you ask the player, and the player can't answer what he's gonna do next because he's unsure. He doesn't know what to do in this situation. Might want more information from you. He might need to talk about it with other players. He might have to think about it for a whole while, and all of that really takes your sessions and it grinds to a halt. It just doesn't go anywhere. And I find that a really interesting point, especially because it doesn't tend to happen that much in my sessions. And that made me think, why? Why doesn't it happen too much? And I think I have some of the reasons figured out, but that's maybe a different video. So for now, I think if you give your players choices, if they feel comfortable in your world, if they feel comfortable in you as a game master, that you aren't gonna fuck them over because they choose the wrong answer or something like that, and if they get used to making choices, tough choices for their characters, then you might not face choice paralysis as much as, well, if you do it any other way. The second thing that came up was the argument that telling an epic story needs pre-prepared linear set pieces. The argument here is, well, if you want to tell an epic story, that epic story is linear, and that means that you might have little interludes or something where the characters can do what they want and make character choices and whatnot, but the main parts of the epic storyline will always be linear parts. They just might be intersected with little sandbox situations. That's an interesting argument because it comes loaded with a whole lot of maybe unintentional assumptions about how an epic storyline works. Because this argument makes sense if you say storytelling works in this way. Storytelling works when the game master writes the story and then the players play out that story. Then you can see how that argument might work, because yeah, of course, if you need to write the story, then you've written a story. That story is linear, so how can you tell a story without making it linear? Yeah, well, the thing here is that if you work from that approach, you won't get anywhere with nonlinear design. You need to throw that overboard. How does storytelling work if you approach it from a nonlinear point of view? Well, it works because the story is written while it is being played out. So it is not that you create a story and then the players play it. It is you at the gaming table and the players. You figure out what is happening, and that is your story. There is no pre-prepared story apart from that. That might be seems strange to you if your background is mainly, well, with novels, video games, and stuff like that. But if you come from an improvisational theater or live action role playing background, then that's pretty straightforward, and you know that that form of storytelling because that's the form of storytelling that is used there, and it is built on what you do in improvisational theater or LARP is you have a context that all the players agree on, and you have rules you play by, but the story happens in the moment. And that's the way we're going to approach nonlinear nonlinear plot design. Does this have the opportunity to create an epic storyline? Well, let's look at stories, epic storylines. What do you need for an epic storyline? Well, you need interesting characters, you need a cool setting, and you need an intriguing theme. And none of those things need to be linear or predetermined. It's all of those things can be prepared in advance, and they still function if you approach the rest of your story in a non-linear way. So let's take a look at how we can prepare in that way for non-linear plot. A non-linear plot line is maybe hard to figure out how to prepare for it, but we all more or less know how we prepare linear plot lines. Linear plot lines are designed by, well, figuring out the plot, what happens, then you figure out the actors you need for that, who's involved, you figure out what the setting is, where does it happen, and you figure out the theme, what is the feeling we want to experience while we play that session. And that's more or less how a linear plotline is usually built, in my experience. And yeah, if you look at that, you can more or less everything in there is doable for a non-linear plotline, except the plot, because you do not want to script out what happens before the players can, well, take their part in the story. So, non-linear plotline, well, it throws out the plot, but it focuses much more on the actors, on the setting, and on the themes. So, the actors are your player characters, your non-player characters, and those non-player characters, you might classify them further, well, in an old school traditional kind of point of view, you would maybe classify them as antagonists, minions, and civilians, but I do not like that approach. That's a two-sided approach. There's good, there's evil, there's the protagonist, there's the antagonist, and it makes your whole story a whole lot less flexible. What I do advise you to do is throw that overboard and focus on every character, every player character, every non-player character. Give them a name, give them a character, something that is special to them, a way how they view the world, things that make them tick. You might have someone who's simple but loyal, who might have someone who's talkative and extroverted, or you might have someone who's scheming and ambitious. Those are character traits, and you might and give every character goals and ambitions, goals and plans, and that's important. That's important for your player characters. So if you create characters together with your players, make sure those characters have goals and ambitions in the gaming world it's about to be set in, because otherwise it's really hard to hook them into plot and to create plot in the session. If they have goals and plans in the gaming world, then you can create your non-player characters in a way that they have goals and plans as well, and those goals and plans might sometimes align with the goals and plans of the player characters, but they are most likely, or they're most useful if they don't align with the player character's plans, if they conflict. Because every conflict between a player character and a non-player character doesn't mean that they kill each other, but it means that you have drama there, that you have social encounter, anything, maybe just tension in the background, but it gives your plot line something to focus on, and it's one of the key pieces you are going to use to create a plot line. If your campaign goes on for a bit after the first session, then you might also have factions. Factions are, well, you might not always have just single non-player characters. They might be part of something bigger, like a knight might be belonging to an empire. That empire might have their own plans and goals and stuff, and this non-player character might be a part of that empire. But factions are something I would advise you to build after the first session during the campaign, because it's very easy to build them from well-built non-player characters. Because if you have a good non-player character, then you can just make it up as you go along and determine a faction around that NPC where he belongs to, where he fits in. So, actors. Make them human. Give them name, give them character, give them plans and goals. A setting is a place or a situation that comes with danger and opportunity. So a place might be a little hamlet up in the mountains, which might come with the danger that, well, it's very remote, you won't get any outside aid very fast, but it might come with the opportunity that those people there need you, the player character or whatever, are very much relying on what they have there. So if you design setting pieces with a danger and opportunity, it gives you something that makes your player's life more interesting, like the danger, and it gives them a reason to interact with the setting pieces in the first place. If you have that ancient ruin where there might be artifacts or stuff lying around, but there are looters there, and it might be dangerous to go there, then you have an excellent piece of setting. Setting might not only be a place, it might also be a situation like civil war or famine or drought or something like that. All of that comes with opportunities, all of that comes with dangers, and that's important to design them in that way, because that way they can interact with the actors of your campaign. Then there's themes. Themes are things, feelings you want to focus on in your campaign. If you want them to spread through the whole campaign, then I would say they are general themes. If you want them to be present if a certain actor is present, or if you are playing in a certain setting, or if it's just something you want to have in a certain session, then I would call that a specific theme. And all of those three things, actors, settings, and themes, are not relying on plot. They are what generates plot. That's the main difference between a non-linear plotline and a linear plotline. The non-linear plotline doesn't create plot and then says, who do I need to staff it? What do I need to, what kind of setting do I need to make it work? No, it goes the other way around. It takes the actors, it takes the setting, it takes the themes, and it makes plot from that. And that plot can be epic. How can it be epic? Because epic is something big. You need high stakes, you need drama. How do you get drama into this? With high stakes questions. High stakes questions are those questions that come up during your campaign that you might be asked by a player, or they might cross your mind, or it might be, well, just stuff that comes up and you don't want to answer it right away because that would take much of the tension out of it. And then you write it down and make it a high stakes question. And that might be stuff like, will this NPC survive the war? That might be stuff like, will this hamlet survive the winter? Will this NPC readjust his moral compass? Will this player do what he always dreamed of? All those might be high stakes questions, and you play the campaign to find out the answer to those questions. And that's how you create epic plot from a non-linear preparation. That sounds quite complex, right? You have got all those different things to take care of and to manage. How do you manage that complexity? Well, I borrowed much of what I usually do as a game master from Apocalypse World, and Apocalypse World is a pen and paper system which focuses on post-apocalyptic sandbox scenarios, but it gives you a lot of useful tools to manage that scenario as well. And those tools are fronts, threats, and timers. And well, I do not have the time in this video to go into any depths there, but I will make a separate video on Apocalypse World and how you can use those tools to create non-linear plot. They are really useful to just keep track of all your moving parts in your campaign. And if I prepare a campaign and if I, prepare for my sessions during an ongoing campaign, the way I keep track of my campaign is by using the sheets and the stuff from Apocalypse World. Another thing that I drew on that inspired me to make this video is a design principle. You heard me talk a lot about novels and TV series and stuff like that in the last sessions. And I said that the design is different to what we want to do in a pen and paper. But even in a novel, even in a TV series, the design principle behind the plot is usually its antagonist first. So you have your actors, and all of those actors are set up, and they need to work without your player characters, and only then can the player character enter. There is a plan for this world. What would happen if there's no player character, if there is no protagonist there? And that's the scene on which the player characters, the protagonists of a story, can enter on. And that design principle behind this is called antagonists first. And yeah, I really like a lot of the stuff you see in novels, but if you just read them, you don't know how they are created, and you might get the wrong impression on how to prepare storylines like that. And essentially, novels are not that created that much differently from campaigns, because the setup is more or less the same. Okay, so far, this is my approach to creating non-linear campaigns, non-linear plot, and I hope you liked it. I hope you took away something from this. And if you liked it, then leave a like. If you want to stay up to date on what we're doing next, subscribe to the channel. If you know someone who might be interested in what we're doing here, then tell him. Share it on social media, whatnot. I would really like it if our small community here grows a bit more, so we can have some further discussions on that. And well, until next time, I hope I could inspire you to maybe build more non-linear stuff into your campaign and to readjust your focus of your sessions and your preparations towards the stuff that doesn't really change much if your player character tries to make an interesting decision. So, until next time, Grim out.